Um, so it feels like we're still in the process of getting organized, but in the meantime, work is happening. So what I wanted to do is just start out by trying to identify the somewhat independent threads of work that are going on so that everyone's aware of it and see if we can work towards, I mean, that we get a lot of parallel work that is great, but at least make sure that all of those threads are aligned and working on the highest priority on each one of the streams. Um, so this is maybe a little bit arbitrary how what I know is going on, but let me try. So um, one stream that's been going on is working through a set of Helm charts so that we have a common set of containers to install. So let me just start with that, and I know Andy's working on it, so just get a quick update on where that is.
So there's a repository called SEBA, and it's got a Helm charts directory in there. And that's that's
Hey, this is Don. I'll be muted. I'm walking down the street.
Okay, thanks,
okay. So in that Helm charts directory, there's a couple of basic Helm charts that can be used to deploy all of the components of SEBA, or at least most of them. And the hope is that we'll continue to build on this. So for example, there's a SEBA substrate chart that deploys Volta and Onos and Kafka. And the way it works is basically by pulling in the individual charts for the Volta chart and the Onos chart, and spinning them up with a set of configurations so that the pieces can all talk together. So this is a kind of a work in progress. There's something basic right now. You can go take a look at it and try it out. But we're still working on this to try to clarify the structure and make it more configurable.
Thanks. So that leads me to one of the things that's going on in the refactoring is that we have now done a little bit of started a pivot from the first configuration, which was based upon Arcord, in which the BNG was effectively implemented in the fabric, to a second configuration, which is the one that we know AT&T wants in their trial, where the BNG will be external to the pod. And the very fact that we now have a second configuration and we know there's going to be a third and possibly a fourth is part of the motivation for that, the little bit of refactoring work that's going on. So on that pivot, I don't know that we have I'm sorry, there was actually a little bit of early work going on, but let's talk about the first configuration, and maybe Jono, if you could give us an update on where things are with the subscriber provisioning that you've been working on.
Are you talking about the AT&T workflow?
Well, basically the Arcord Lite version.
Yeah, so where we left that was that we had sort of bottom-up ONU discovery and bring-up, and we had the ability in XOS through this OSS service to be able to call out to external databases to validate ONUs that are coming out to check if they are allowed on the pod or not. And if they're not, then we can disable them and kick them off the pod. And then we were able to automatically generate CNS tags for users on those ONUs and provision flows for them across the OLT. And then we didn't have any automatic authentication in that workflow, but we were able to manually push subscribers and have their provision in the fabric. Have their subscriber termination provision in the fabric so that they could reach the internet. So that's where that workflow was left off. So we have the automatic ONU, but no authentication or DHCP workflow.
So is that what you are possibly demoing next week?
So next week, it seems we've pivoted to the new workflow where the BNG is external. That's what we were planning to do next week.
Okay, I wasn't sure which one you're going to do. Okay, so as for the status of that second workflow, any?
Yes. The second workflow leverages the same bottom-up ONU discovery that we had in the first workflow, but the difference is the authentication. One of the big differences is the authentication. And so we're working right now to integrate the 802.1x authentication workflow so that after the ONU comes up, the residential gateway can authenticate with the network via 802.1x. These events will be events from the 802.1x authentication will be sent to XOS, where XOS will be able to then provision the subscriber VLANs on the pod. And in this workflow, the BNG is external, so there's no configuration of the BNG required. And subsequently, we'll be able to do DHCP relay on the OLT.
Is this integrating the top-down pushing down of the data from a top-down type of approach as has been defined in the user stories that I wrote? Because I don't see that the second use case is similar to the first one at all. I mean, you're not dipping up into OSS. OSS is pushing down via APIs, as been described previously on these meetings, also described in the Volta meetings, and has been written into user stories in terms of I want to create the idea of creating an abstract OLT, the idea of pushing down ONT IDs and ONT serial numbers, being able to tie in the creating of subscribers from a push down model and tying that information into the dynamic model, as opposed to kind of continuing to follow the dynamic model. Is that, I guess that's not what's being demoed next week, but is that on the roadmap? Because that's kind of what we need.
Yeah, I think I need to look into that in more detail, understand what's going on there. But certainly, from the subscriber point of view, it's always been the case that you can push subscribers into the system from a top-down point of view. We're always going to operate in a mode where we have the bottom-up ONU discovery.
So
and of course,
well, we need the OSS or and OSS. The idea of what's been described in the user stories and the modeling is that you have a very abstract idea, and you need to be able to assign it a very specific ONT ID, and you need to pass down the very specific ONT ID is very key into the calculation of where the SVID and the CVID goes. So that's why those APIs define pushing all of that stuff down, which is not related to the dynamic model, the bottoms up model of whatever ONT the bottoms up model might actually apply. So there is glue that ties what the OSS is going to push down in terms of subscriber provisioning versus what the bottom up is going to discover about what's actually there. And tying those two things together, I think, is part of what we were hoping, what the user stories were asking for SEBA and them to do.
Yeah, so I think the point where that happens is XOS or NEM, I guess. So whatever data is coming in from the top will be pushed into the XOS data store, and from there we can use that to provision the underlying system.
Correct, but so okay, all right. So that's not what you're demoing next week. You're doing some other things next week. That's fine. Hopefully we can get all of those demos and things recorded and everything. I think that's kind of the standard practices. I'm actually going to be on vacation for the next 2 weeks. I do have some meetings. I do have a meeting hopefully today with Saurav later today to have to kind of work through what we're looking for and what we're expecting. Anyways, I hopefully we'll make some progress in the next 2 weeks, even though I'm on vacation. But hopefully we can keep that moving.
So this is exactly the purpose of what we're trying to do here, is to tease out where these gaps are. And let me just make the point that I had conflated, and Jono helped separate the distinction between two separate things. One is fairly static, which is the configuration that says the BNG, which was the one of the pivots that had just been made from the original bit of work. The second being the top-down versus bottom-up. And so those are separable, and the progress that's being made, I think, is the external BNG, and we've not yet also made the pivot, I think, on everything that's needed for the subscriber provisioning, as Mike just pointed out. All right. So
I guess in order for me, and I'll just kind of describe why I see that they're tied together, is because for an external BNG, the data has to be pushed down for what those VLANs are going to use, because that's being controlled externally. So it's not a decision that can be made inside of the platform. Maybe it's just a subtle thing.
No,
but for me, the subscriber provisioning is when the external BNG configurations are gonna be tied together.
Great, perfect. That's great. That's a very good point. Okay, so
just one. Can we have a pointer to that story so we can take a look at them? Because I was going through this one in SEBA, and I'm not sure I identified which stories are you talking about.
They were all the ones created by Michael Gasser. I think Sarav put them into a couple of different buckets. But if you look for user stories created by Michael Gasser, it was the presentation that I gave a couple weeks ago on the meeting. I did put the presentation information up on the shared Google Drive, so that I made a few minor updates to the things as I was putting in the user stories. It's all related to what I presented previously, and I just consolidated it into the user stories as well. So going into Google Docs and looking for the FCAPS presentation there would have the same information, and it's been tied in maybe with a diagram update or two into the user stories. But they're all the ones created by Mike Gasser.
Okay, so thanks. I just put a link in the chat to the document just to remind everyone, and there is a SEBA FCAPS user story PDF from you. That's one representation of that information. Okay, so we can circle back if we need to drill down on any of these, but I want to make sure we get through all of them. So we've got the Helm charts, we've got the workflow / internal external BGP. The third, I want to break this apart into a couple of things. We've got some monitoring infrastructure being built, and then we've got some monitoring events being posted. So let me turn to the monitoring infrastructure first. This is Kafka, but there's been some additional work done here by Matteo and others. And so I'm going to let Matteo talk about that a little bit, but there is a design document that he and some others have been working on that I will post a link to it, but it's in that same directory, I believe. Yeah, there it is. So go ahead, Matteo.
Yeah, so first of all, a disclaimer that the document is nothing definitive. It's still under discussion, and we published it there to have feedback from the broader community. So it's still completely open to discussion, and there is nothing written in stone in there. But basically, we started taking a look at a possible infrastructure or architecture, if you wish, to collect monitoring and logging at a platform level. So we discussed it previously in this call, and we felt there was agreement to use Kafka as the aggregator for all the platform-wise messages. So from there, we are going to pull the information and publish them in the appropriate format. So we're planning to use Elastic Stack on top of Kafka to display and aggregate log messages, while we are thinking about using Prometheus for statistics and alarms. We went with these two proposals since they looks to be the standard adopted in the cloud space, and they are maintained by other community while being open source, so it's less work on us, and they are production ready. We are starting to work on a proof of concept to aggregate the statistics in Prometheus, and hopefully we'll have a demo for next week. But I encourage everyone to take a look at the document and give feedback on that.
Thanks, Matteo. So I posted a link to the document. So now we've got 2 demos, I think, lined up for next week. That's great. Let me jump to the other half of monitoring, which will be to the Atlanta Foundry, and I see Michael is on, and Don is on as well. Just an update on what information is being posted and any progress on templates defining the format.
Okay, this is Mike Zadig. We're still working on the template. I posted up as in a comment to the SEBA 4 what we're currently getting, and also William had posted the structure that would go up coming out of the proxy that either NEM would transform the Kafka code or the Kafka structures up to ONAP. So I placed those under the SEBA 4 item.
One thing I forgot to mention about the architecture is that it wants to be message format agnostic, so that we can adopt the same format message for the whole platform, so that we don't end up having different events based on the consumer.
Right. Maybe I should get in touch with you directly and we can talk about that, and then see if we can make the alignment properly. Would that work best?
Yeah, absolutely. But
okay.
What I meant is that if the community believes that this is the format that we should adopt, there is no problem for us.
Okay.
Yeah, Michael, this is Chip Bowling. I'm working on the OpenOMCI, and I've got the performance monitoring state working for the performance intervals, and I'll be getting ready to start publishing things on the Kafka bus. And one of the questions I came up with was on how to indicate counter width. For some counters, they're 32 bits and they'll saturate, whereas some might be 64 bits. Should we have that in the message somehow, or how should we best communicate that information?
I'm not sure. You're ready to post that on the Kafka bus?
Yes, I've got to the point where I can actually, I actually need to write the performance groups to publish for this code that I wrote. That looks like the examples, but that's just right now JSON, and for like the octet bucket sizes, those counters, they're available in different MEs. In one ME, they're 32 bits wide with the exact same attribute names as those that are 64-bit wide.
Mm-hmm.
And on a 10 gig PON, your octets and packet values can easily saturate in 15 minutes. So how do we best convey the counter width when we do publish on the bus?
Yeah, I would say put a field in, because there's no way you're going to create a decoder ring and keep it up to date.
Okay, so if there's, yeah, but I mean, typically they're in the if they're JSON, then it'll be a group of counters. I know you can do it with XML, but I definitely don't want to introduce XML. But we can talk about this offline. I just wanted to raise it.
Yeah, let's do it. Like you, me, and Mike.
Okay.
So, Chip, can you help me get my head around the breadth of what coverage are you looking at? What are you reporting performance data on?
It'll be, I can report on both statistics coming off the, all the way from, error counts on just basically on the PON, or at the MAC bridge port. I can report Ethernet statistics on both upstream and downstream. And this is as seen by the ONU.
Okay. I'm just taking some notes to try to summarize everything that we've heard here, so I'll send them out afterwards. But the work, across the breadth of SEBA, you're focused on both the performance stats and across, again, the breadth of SEBA. Michael, you're focused on both actually quite serious failure alarms right now, right?
That's correct.
All right.
Hi, Mike. This is Shad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Mike, I didn't quite catch. So you have a commit on alarms in OpenOLT, and so I guess the discussion was around normalizing the alarm schema. And right now the current implementation is that the actual information of the alarm is in a key values, and these are not really normalized across adapters. So are you going to? Going to propose some sort of normalized schema for alarms?
Yeah, that's where we're trying to get to.
Okay.
Yeah, we had talked, I guess, earlier, a few months back, Jim, and I guess a few other people, that, we have a library that we're using for the AdTran that provides a base class for both performance monitoring, and then there's a separate one for alarms. And we just need to get together as a group and come up with hopefully one common library that we can share so that everyone has identical alarms being reported.
Okay, so Chip, so what you're saying is that you already have something like that for in your AdTran OLT adapter?
Yeah, if you look in the AdTran OLT, I believe it's a PKI and an alarm subdirectory.
Okay.
Let me look real quick. But for PM, it provides a fairly easy way to create performance monitoring groups. And so that's already out there. It needs to be improved to be able to do independent time intervals and independent enable or disable. And then there's an additional one for alarms.
Yeah, those are packages of classes, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
And that way we can keep it somewhat straightforward. So under the AdTran OLT, there's alarm subdirectory, and there's a PKI subdirectory. And I'm willing to change this in any way possible, just as long as we all, we all report the same information. But we can offer this as a base if that looks like it's good for Python-based adapters.
Sure. Why not? If you already have that, if you want to raise a Jira and just do it, yeah, I'm all for it. If you already have something, and let's push that up as a common library.
Okay, I'll do it as a common library, and I guess I'll put it under extensions to start with, and then we can figure out where it goes into later.
Thanks.
Okay.
So where we still have monitoring gaps are outside of Volta. Um, I haven't heard of any work there. Is there anyone that wants to speak up to that? Well, I can slightly rephrase that. Tio, does anything you're doing going to give us performance data out of Kubernetes?
Yeah, so Kubernetes is already instrumented by default with Prometheus code. So we'll get Kubernetes statistics for free on a container base, and we can aggregate them as we need to.
Okay, good, thanks. Others, does that include physical server stats?
No, it's only container-based, but I'm pretty sure there is something we can reuse to have information about the physical servers. I'll take a look in these days.
So, Kubernetes Prometheus schemas usually don't install, don't provide stats of the nodes. The problem is Prometheus uses metrics from the kubelet on each node, and the kubelet normalizes the schema in a way to only provide data that are relevant to Kubernetes resources, so Kubernetes services, Kubernetes pods, and Kubernetes containers. If we want non-Kubernetes resource data, like the overall usage of a node or the overall usage of resources by a non-Kubernetes application, we will have to deploy a separate component that might integrate with Prometheus. It doesn't come out of the box.
Okay, so thanks. So I've listed that as an open point, but it's also the case that the SEBA reference design team has pointed to Redfish as a standard they want to adopt. Has anyone looked into that yet? Okay, and I think for this for the switches as well. Well, there's data being collected by ONOS, of course. All right. We don't go into a lot of depth in the internals of Volta on this call, apart from where it interconnects with the rest of SEBA in terms of performance monitoring. So if I continue to exclude the internals of Volta for a moment, what gaps do we still have that no one has talked about yet? In terms of at least the first order of priorities. Obviously, there's some bigger lifecycle management things we have to get back to. Okay, maybe we're in it. From my point of view, it feels like we got pretty good coverage in everything we just talked about. So we've been proceeding.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Good.
Sorry, I was muted.
Good. Thank you. It's good to get that confirmed. So we've been proceeding in a fairly parallel, autonomous way, and it actually is working not horribly. And we've piecemeal figured out that A needs to talk to B, and that's all good. Is there something more rigorous we need to be doing in terms of planning? So let me kind of throw it to Zach, our Scrum Master.
So I think right now everybody's been sort of working on what they think is the most broken or most important to their particular need. We historically have done sort of a formal Scrum process, but that had much better defined goals for the release. And I feel like we have those, but I'm not sure. Usually, the other benefit of doing that process was to find out what other people are working on and to have that sort of roundtable discussion. Yeah, I'm thinking it's probably worth doing something like that, just at least from a review perspective, to know what people are working on and maybe fill in each other's gaps. To that end, it may be useful to start having some sort of a planning or Kanban or Scrum-oriented review periodically. Either we could do it during, if we don't have things to talk about, we could do it during this meeting, or we could have a separate meeting for that. I'd be interested to know what people think about doing that. Any general comments?
I do think it would be good to get a scrum going and to look at when we think we're going to be estimating, we're going to be getting deliverables, and when we can, do some sprints and package some stuff up and get some stuff to people to use. I definitely think getting that process going and getting some visibility into it would be good.
Okay.
Yeah, I concur.
Let's use this meeting.
Yeah,
I mean, if we run out of time, we'll do something else. But
I think we could probably, because these meetings have gone pretty quick, and unless we have other planning things, we could do some sort of alternating every other week's thing if that'll work.
The other thing is that we're tending towards demo oriented,
right?
And we're going to do 2 demos next week. So
yeah, so let's aim to do demos next week, and then the following week, is that the week that there's the meeting in Atlanta? Is that 2 weeks out? I don't think so. We can look at, but we could
the week of the 30th.
Yeah. Let's plan to maybe start that week with sort of a scrum and discussion.
Sounds good.
Does that sound good to everyone?
Yep.
Good. Okay.
All right. So what have we not covered? So I'll sit up.
So we haven't.
Go ahead.
I was going to say we haven't talked about the new Fabric Cross Connect service yet, the one that I'm starting implementing. I guess that's part of the second workflow, but I think we're all in agreement as to how it's going to work. It's going to be replacement for the VSG-HW service. Is there any further discussion we need to have from a planning perspective? And also, do we intend that to be part of next week's demo?
Well, if we can include it, so let's break it into 2 pieces. There's the NEM version of the managing the service, and then there is the implementation in ONOS. I don't know anything about the status of the ONOS implementation. Is that part of the demo, Jono?
Yeah, I think if it's ready, it'd be nice to demo that. I think in the ONOS implementation is ready as far as I know. It's just a matter of having a service that can configure that properly.
All right, so Scott.
Yeah, I think I will probably be able to deliver a service by Monday. I could use a little bit of help, maybe understanding the BNG. I don't know exactly where I'm going to find out what port the BNG is attached to. So that may be some additional modeling there, or maybe it's something that is statically configured at this time. I could use a BNG expert. Maybe that's Jono.
Yeah, let's talk about that offline.
Are you looking for a general BNG or the BNG you guys are looking to implement in the Fabric?
I think Scott was talking about how does he understand where the BNG can be attached to.
Yeah, the interface is with. How do we communicate with this external BNG to learn what we need to learn? And that gets back to Mike's.
Well, and that's part of what I was saying. I don't know that you're going to communicate to the external BNG to learn what you're going to learn. You're going to be given information from OSS, kind of in a top-down flow to know what you need to know. And part of the user stories that I created talked about some being able to define some metadata for an abstract OLT that says, you know, this virtual OLT and these sets of ports are going to be aggregated through this, you know, ag switch onto this uplink port of an ag switch that's going to go out to the 7450. That's all data that has to get somehow built inside of ONOS and then given a name, and then, you know, then the top-down model talks to that abstract entity that has been defined. So I don't think the entity is going to be defined by the top. I don't envision that the entity is defined by the top down. I imagine that entity is built somehow with some APIs inside of NEM to
Okay, so that is exactly, Scott, the
together and make it uplink
we were talking about. All right, so
in NEM or wherever.
So, Mike, with you going on vacation, who would be the right person? Who would be the right person at AT&T to walk through the details with? Is it Tom?
Tom Moore will be there.
Perfect. I see Tom on the call. All right, Scott. I will.
Thank you.
Scott, I will help get all of you connected here.
Okay, great. Yeah, I think it's just, you know, a small amount of remaining detail that I need to finish the XOS modeling.
Well, all right. So as of next week, we hope to have a proof of concept of all the service modeling that Mike was just talking about. It probably isn't the final richness that we're going to need. Okay. Anything else? All right. We'll look forward to some demos next week then. Bye.